Good evening. Sorry. Good evening, everyone. Broadcasting live, September 1st, 2015. Today we officially have a home. 2 Bond Street, South. Can we get a picture up? Has everyone seen the picture?
Sure. Just learned how to do that yesterday, and
Can you put a
it'll take
picture
me
up?
it'll take me just a minute to remember where that was.
Okay, I got it. I'm ready.
Okay.
Ta-da! This is our new home. And right here, I've put today we went and moved in. And I put the Dhamma flag. Someone sent us the flag. Well, we got one flag so far. And it was the Dhamma wheel flag, and I put it here in the window. But then I forgot to take a picture of it. So I have to go back and do that. Right now I'm back in Stony Creek. But this is our new home. I was thinking maybe we need a sign somewhere. We'll put a sign maybe here in the window. I don't know what kind of sign we'd put. I was thinking I'd like to put something that said McMaster Buddhism Association. So this could be the home of that association, maybe.
That would be nice. Did they have any kind of a logo or anything like that?
No. There's nothing yet. What we are doing is there's this fair, right? So we're going to have a table at the fair on the 9th. So on the 8th, on the 7th, actually, we're going to have a meeting at the house, 2 Bond Street, to talk about the fair and to put together this display. The president got a three panel display board already. So I don't know what the one that you got, Robin. What is it like? Is it like a professional one, like one of those expensive ones, or is it just?
No, it's not an expensive one. It's the one kids use for middle school science fairs and things. I
Okay.
think we had looked at one on Amazon. But I can bring it up just in case you ever need it for anything else.
Maybe we will.
Sure.
Anyway, let's get started on our session tonight. So that's just some news. Yay for us. But let's get into the quote. Robin, would you do us the honor?
Yes. Develop the meditation that is love, for by doing so, hatred will be got rid of. Develop the meditation that is compassion, for by doing so, harming will be got rid of. Develop the meditation that is sympathetic joy, for by doing so, dislike will be gotten rid of. Develop the meditation that is equanimity, for by doing so, sensory reaction will be got rid of. Develop the meditation on the impure, for by doing so, attachment will be got rid of. Develop the meditation that is the perception of impermanence, for by doing so, the conceit, I am, will be got rid of.
Immediately I wonder, what the heck does sensory reaction mean? It's an interesting it's an interesting translation, actually. Reaction, reactivity, because we talk about that, right? We're talking about becoming free from reaction, not reacting. And that may be a good translation here. The word the word the Buddha uses, patigha. Patigha usually means aversion. It's a description of the aspect of the salient aspect of an anger-based mind. So a dosa mula citta, a mind that is a mind state that is rooted in anger, is called patiga sahagatang. No, patiga sampayutang. Sorry, patiga sampayutang, connected with patiga, with aversion. So patiga means like an attacking. Pati means against. So it means literally like knocking against. But here actually the Pali English Dictionary says sensory reaction, which is interesting. So it's an interesting word because that's really it. It can be positive or it can be negative, but upeka is what frees you from that. This list of meditations is noteworthy in that it shows it's not just one meditation, but the list is actually even more noteworthy in the context. The context is Majjhima Nikaya 62, the Maha Rahulawada Sutta, the greater discourse on giving instruction to Rahula. Rahula, as we know, was the Buddha's son. The Buddha had a son and a wife. So there's this talk about monks having wives. Still not valid because he had them when he was not a Buddha, before he even became a monk. So we know the story. He was a prince, and he had a wife, and he had a son, and he left them both behind to seek out a means of realizing the path that leads to cessation of suffering. And anyone who criticizes the Buddha for it should look at the results and see how both his wife and his son became monastics and enlightened monastics as a result. His father became an anagami, I think, and his mother died when he was 5 years old, but she became an angel, and she listened to him when he taught the Abhidhamma up in heaven. This is all the tradition. And so he taught her as well. I mean, it seems, a skeptic could say, well, it seems like they tried to make it very clear that he helped his whole family. But he ended up, if the tradition is to be believed, he ended up helping more than even his immediate family. Ananda was a relative of the Buddha. Devadatta was a relative of the Buddha. Anuruddha, Mahanama, one of the Mahanamas, a different, not the one that ordained. Upali, and more. A lot of relatives of the Buddha became monks and became enlightened. Devadatta didn't become enlightened, but he eventually gained something, and is said to be destined to become a Pacceka Buddha in the future. Anyway, so this is to Rahula, who is the Buddha's son, who became a novice. And why it's interesting in the context is that the Buddha, first of all, the introduction, the Buddha gives Rahula some instruction when they're going on alms round. He says that form is to be regarded as non-self. Netang mama neso hamasmi nameso atati. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. Eva metang yatha buddhang samapanyaya tattabang. This should be seen with right wisdom as it is. And Rahula asks, only form? And the Buddha says, no, form, vedanas, feelings, recognition, thoughts, consciousness. And when he says this, Rahula thinks to himself, how could I go on alms round, worry about food, when I've just been taught this by the Blessed One? So he goes without food that day. And he goes and sits by a tree. And then Sariputta comes, and tells him to practice mindfulness of breathing, anapanasati. And the commentary says, Sariputta gave this instruction not knowing that the Buddha had just given him a different meditation subject. So Sariputta comes, he's been taught this profound teaching on non-self, and he's sitting there meditating on this or trying to see this in the five aggregates, so practicing vipassana. And then Sariputta comes and tells him to practice anapanasati. So a little bit confused, in the evening, Rahula goes to see the Buddha and asks him, how do you practice anapanasati? How should anapanasati be practiced so that it's of great fruit and benefit? And the Buddha basically ignores his question, or he gives one of these answers that puts the question aside for the moment and explains something else first. And so he doesn't just mention all these other types of meditation. He starts by talking about the four elements, goes back to his original teaching, talks about earth, air, earth, water, fire, air, the space element. And then he gives five similes that are similar to the ones we looked at last night, based on the five elements. He says, develop meditation that is like earth. For when you develop meditation that is like earth, arisen agreeable and disagreeable contacts will not invade your mind and remain. Just as people throw things on the earth, but the earth is not repelled, humiliated, or disgusted. Therefore, be like the earth, be like the air, be like fire, be like water, be like space. And then he talks about all these other types of meditation. So these first five are not real meditations, although they're meditation on the five elements, the four elements, and the space element is proper vipassana meditation. But then he says, develop meditation like earth. But he's talking about not reacting, because the earth doesn't react when people urinate or defecate or try to dig it up. Be like the water, because the water doesn't fuss no matter what people throw or drop in the water. Be like fire, because fire burns everything and is not repelled by it. So be like the elements. In essence, this is a teaching to be natural. He's talking about this idea of returning to nature and giving up this artificial, complicated, unwarranted attachment, reactivity to things. He shows that nature doesn't, it's not nature to do these things. Anger isn't a part of nature. Greed isn't a part of nature. Delusion isn't a part of nature. These are things that we've developed, constructs that we've created. Nature just is. But then he talks about specific meditations that one should practice. So he says, practice loving kindness, practice. He wants to be clear with that, with Rahula, that it's not just anapanasati, not to fixate just on the breath. So he says, love, compassion, the four Brahma Viharas are useful. Foulness is a useful meditation. The impure, as he translates, right? And then he says, develop meditation on the perception of impermanence, because this is the most important. The conceit I am will be abandoned. That's the one that really cuts to the root, because you can practice foulness and abandon lust, but it's temporary. You will still give rise potentially to lust for as long as you still have attachment to self, as long as you still have the I belief, conceit. But then he says, what I don't think is in the quote that we looked at, he says, practice mindfulness of breathing. So he does come back to the question, and now he answers the question. He says, one goes to the tree, and he goes to the root of a tree or an empty hut, and then he goes through the means of practicing anapanasati. First, as a samatha practice to tranquilize the mind and the body, and then to liberate the mind, liberate the body. But then he points out that one should breathe contemplating impermanence. So to contemplate impermanence It's required that one focus no longer on the breath, but on the four elements that make up the breath. So the breath is actually not breath, it's sensations of earth, air, water, and fire here, 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 and in the stomach. So by focusing on the stomach, we focus on the air element mainly, this tension in the stomach, which is coarse and easy to observe, but it allows one to see impermanence because it's not stable. It's not always going to be smooth, going the way you want it to be. And as a result, one will be able to contemplate fading away, cessation, relinquishment, and that's it. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated in this way, even the final in-breaths and out-breaths, meaning when you die, are known. So the moment when you die mindfully. This is the teaching he gave to his son. So it's a rather comprehensive set of meditations. And maybe not comprehensive, it's a complete list of sorts, you know. It's like if anyone took this, they could take it as a grocery list of practices to do. There are other lists, similar lists, different lists, but this is one such list that gives you an idea of sort of an overview of different meditations that are useful. Of course, he doesn't include mindfulness of the Buddha in there, which is also considered a useful one. But that's our quote. Does anyone have any questions?
Is equanimity not a proper base camp for one to use while seeking the summit to enlightenment?
I don't know. I mean, the problem with seeking out equanimity is it potentially leads to avoidance or leads to cultivation of formations like artificial equanimity. Many kinds of equanimity. The equanimity that you want to find is based on insight. It's based on mundane wisdom, mundane insight into the three characteristics. Once you see the three characteristics, equanimity comes naturally. Once you're truly equanimous without even trying, but equanimous because you just know things as they are. There's no intention on your behalf or no seeking out of equanimity. You just are equanimous because you see there's no benefit in reacting. That is really the final moment before enlightenment. The next moment there's the cessation. The next moment there's a realization of impermanent suffering and non-self. A moment after that, or a couple of moments after that, is cessation, which is Magganyana, Palanyana, the attainment of Nibbana. So I wouldn't seek out equanimity exactly. I would seek out insight. Practice the word satipatthana vipassana is the most useful description of meditation that you can find. It's mindfulness for the purpose of attaining insight.
How can you be in a happy state in the way of Satipatthana Vipassana?
If you're looking to be in a happy state, you've got a problem because you're no longer objective. So that's something you should work on. You should apply satipatthana vipassana. Apply satipatthana to attain vipassana about your desire to attain a happy state so that you no longer wish for one. Because as long as you're looking for one, you're going to be subjective, partial. And as long as you're partial and subjective, you'll never see things clearly, you'll never attain equanimity. So see, equanimity isn't about the peace of the equanimity. It's very peaceful. But equanimity is fearlessness. Not being afraid, not being dependent, not clinging. Anisito javiharati. Dwelling independent. Natyakinchi loke upadhyati. Not clinging to anything in the world.
Bhante, did Venerable Rahula die earlier than the Buddha? Do you know what happened if so?
If I remember correctly, very little is said about Rahula. Speculation is that as the Buddha's son, um, he didn't want to be somehow the object of people's. Uh, he didn't want to be in the spotlight because he felt that it would lead to favoritism, etc. But I think that's just speculation. Just give me a second here. Let's find the canonical Rahula. Yeah, he predeceased the Buddha and even Sariputta, and the place of his death is given as Tawatingsa. For 12 years, he never laid in a bed, never lay in a bed, but that's it. So not much is known. But he died in heaven. It says he died in Tawatingsa, which is interesting because that would be where his mother was reborn. So maybe he went back to see his mother before he passed away. But he passed away even before Sariputta, who was his teacher, which is interesting. Asoka, it says, built a chaitya in honor of Rahula to be specially worshipped by novices. That's interesting. We don't have a record of where he built that chaitya, but there apparently is a Rahula chaitya to be honored by novices, to be respected by novices, because Rahula was the consummate novice, the ideal novice, kind of.
The word, therefore, should arise in the mind at the same location as the object itself. To me, the mind feels somewhat formless. What do you mean by location, and how do I locate it?
Hmm. Well, when you know that your stomach is rising, your mind is in the stomach. I mean, it's one way of explaining it. I mean, it takes a bit of practice to get that, but you'll see that your mind, it's as though your mind goes to the stomach. You're right, mind doesn't take up space, mind doesn't have location exactly. But the best way to understand it is that the point is that the mind isn't up here, thinking, rising, falling. The mind should be down in the stomach. I mean, it's figurative language, it's not exactly precise, but
Why doesn't a person just shave their head, put on robes, and join a monastery instead of traveling to, say, Sri Lanka to be ordained?
well, that's what you do if you went to Sri Lanka. I mean, if you're talking about why not just join a monastery here, well, why not? Sure. One reason would be monasteries in Sri Lanka tend to be a little more mm, authentic, or can be a little more authentic. Like they're in a forest or they have caves or so on, and they have teachers who are well respected and revered. And they're in a village where you go on alms round every day and people support the monastery. Traditional is maybe another way of describing them. But I think Sri Lanka is a really good place to do it. The point is the atmosphere in Sri Lanka is probably better for the most part. But absolutely, but if you're talking about ordination, if you can't just show up at a monastery with robes and a shaved head and they just let you in. They're not going to let you in. They might if you had white robes, for example. But if you tried to pretend you're a monk, they'd kick you out right away because it's a big deal to become a monk, and you have to be accepted. You have to be observed. You have to follow rules. So if you just showed up and said, "Hey, look, I'm just like you guys," they'd say, "No, no, you're not, because you're not. You haven't been accepted by the sangha. And to be accepted, you have to be grilled. You have to be trained. There's a process to it. If you showed up in robes and asked to be let in, it'd be probably hurt your chances of ever ordaining, because it would be a sign that you don't. Well, I mean, to some extent. I mean, it's a dangerous thing to just think that putting on robes and a robe and shaving your head makes you a monk. I mean, of course, there are real monks who are quite corrupt, but that's not the fault of the system. It's the fault of those monks. The system is important.
Is there something given to an ordained monk to show that they're a monk? Paperwork or a certificate or something? Or
It can be. I mean, it wasn't in the Buddha's time.
but today, is there something like that? Or
Depends on the monastery. In Thailand, there's a big certification process. I've got a monk certificate from Thailand.
nice.
I've even got a monk passport, but it went through the laundry and it's mostly just deteriorated by now.
Oh, there's that impermanence.
Yeah.
Doesn't seeking insight prevent objectivity?
And we need to get him on here and answer that question himself, because I know he doesn't believe that. I mean, these are words, right? But seeking insight, doesn't that prevent objectivity? It would if you preferred insight over delusion, say, right? If you had this preference, and when delusion arose, you got upset based on it. If delusion upsets you, then yes, the preference in that case, it sounds kind of weird to say, but if your preference was to the extent that you disliked the delusion, you got upset by the delusion, when you realize, oh, I was so deluded there, it makes you upset. What we're doing in meditation is being objective. So if you want to really be nitpicky, you could say, well, you want to be objective, right? Or you're trying to be objective. But it's a bit silly to say that, right? I mean, it's like you want not to want. I don't know. I mean, no, we're talking about the opposite of wanting. We're talking about the opposite. Whatever the opposite of being partial is, that's what we're attempting to do. But it's not even an attempt. It's just it's, if you could, let's put it this way, it's like a realization, preliminary realization, that subjectivity, partiality is a problem, is problematic, right? Realizing that it is to not be preferred, right? It is preferable to be objective. Hmm? So you could actually argue that in that one instance, for sure, you are not objective. But it's not even true. It's a realization. Once you realize that anger is bad, give an example, anger or lust, once you realize that lust is problematic, you become partial against lust. But it's not, it's objective, you see? It's based on logic and reasoning. It's not based on partiality. So what we're talking about is not that you ever judge things. You don't ever judge things. Sure, you judge things. You judge everything. You judge bad deeds to be bad. You judge good deeds to be good. And more than that, you stop judging deeds. You judge seeking deeds, seeking results to be problematic. But there's a judgment there. But it's a judgment not based on partiality. It's a judgment based on insight and wisdom. So the preliminary insight is there. Anyone who has seen other people die or get old or get sick or start to realize that they are going to get old, sick, and die comes to realize that addiction is problematic. There's a flaw in chasing things, in clinging things to things. So then there's a partiality against clinging to things. There's a partiality for being objective, but it's not partiality. It's a judgment based on insight, preliminary, basic, non-meditative based, not exactly meditative based, but it's based on wisdom. That's what happens. I mean, everyone comes to meditation out of wisdom. They don't come to meditation out of greed, thinking, "Oh, gimme, gimme, gimme." They do for if they're looking for tranquility. People will come to meditation wanting to bliss out, and these are the people who sit there and like to smile a lot. And when you try to get them to be objective, they freak out and get angry and so on. So seeking objectivity, does it lead to partiality? No. Seeking insight. If a person, as I said, was obsessed with insight, I want to know something. Um, so yeah, I guess actually the answer is yes, because seeking insight is a problem. I mean, it always has been a problem. That's why we make it clear you're not practicing vipassana. You're not sitting there and trying to understand things. You're observing. You're practicing satipatthana. You're observing, and whatever insight comes, it comes when it comes. But actually, I agree completely, because a lot of people will sit there wondering why insight hasn't arisen. When is it going to arisen? They have this clinging to it, and if they were to focus on that, if they were to look at that desire for insight, they would progress in the meditation. They would gain true insight.
When attaining nirvana, does one have to leave the body?
There's no one or no body. So there's no such thing as one leaving the body. One is just a conventional, and body is just convention. But conventionally speaking, nibbana has been said to be in here, in this 6-foot frame. So no, there's no leaving the body in a conventional sense. It's probably the answer I should have given. Imasaming yewa payama majje kalevare. Imasaming yewa payama majje kalevare. I'm misquoting that, I think. The end of the world is found in this 6-foot frame.
Bhante, what are the main things a layperson should do to have a good life?
Oh, it's a bit of a difficult question. There's a lot, and the Buddha has taught quite a bit. I guess one thing that makes it difficult is lay life is always going to be problematic, and we don't have answers for all of the problems that confront lay people. You're going to have crazy problems. I just met with an old one of my oldest friends, I've known since I was very young. On my way back from the university, we both grew up hundreds, maybe 1,000, I don't know, hundreds of miles from here, hundreds of kilometers from here. And yet we met at the bus stop today for the second time. We met a couple of weeks ago on the bus. Because he works just down the road, actually, which is bizarre. And he had a girlfriend, and she was pregnant, and she lost her child. And she had other children, and she was living with the father of those children, so it was all mixed up. And just listening to him tell, I mean, how do you answer that problem? I mean, now he's alone, so it's a little easier. The problem would be ameliorated by meditating, which, I mean, is always a good go-to answer. Meditation will solve a lot of your problems. Meditation will allow you to live very well as a layperson, provided you also, need morality, keeping the 5 precepts. But there's a lot more. A really good sutta is the Sigalovada Sutta. It talks about the kind of friends you should keep, and reminding us to be discerning in regards to people. So there are good friends and bad friends. How to avoid ruin. It's a really good sutta for lay people. It's what all the traditional Buddhists will point to. Any of my monk friends in Asia you ask them about being a layperson, they'd immediately point you to the Sigalovada Sutta. We have to learn it. I had to learn the basics of it for my first Dhamma. I took a Dhamma exam. I took one exam and passed one exam in my life in Thailand, a monastic exam. Not a big deal, but it was sitting in there with all the novices. Taking that exam was fun. I spent a whole year studying on my own, memorizing these things on my own. Went to the classes, but the classes were kind of useless. Not useless, actually. One class I went to was quite entertaining, but yeah, still kind of not very useful because you just have to memorize stuff. Sati sampajanya thammi upakara mag sati kap sampajanya. Sati ความระลึกได้สัมปชัญญะความรู้ตัวธรรมที่ทำให้งามขันติความอดทนสรจะความเสงี่ยมบุคคลที่หาได้ยากปุปการีผู้กระทำแล้วซึ่งผู้กระทำคุณ I don't know something like that กตัญญูกตเวทีผู้รู้แล้วซึ่งผู้รู้สิ่งที่บุคคลอื่นทำให้แล้วพยายามที่จะตอบแทน I had to memorize all of this. And these are the basics. I don't remember much more, but I had to take this exam. And when it came time to take the exam, I took it with all the Nawaka monks, these monks who ordain Nawaka. We were all Nawaka at the time, I think. I don't know if I guess I was still Nawaka. New monks. But these were the monks who ordain only for 3 months and then they disrobe. So they weren't taking it all that seriously, and they had help from the senior monks. So when it came time to take the exams, we're sitting in the exam room, and the big head monk, who's he's an important monk who's supposed to look over us and be the exam. What do you call the person who the examiner? I don't know, the person who watches to make sure we don't cheat. He came into the room and he says, "Okay, no tucharit. Tucharit is ducharita. Charita is behavior. Do is bad behavior. So tucharit translates to cheating. Yeah, tucharit," he said. And then he walks out, leaves the room. As soon as he leaves the room, well, within 5 minutes, one of the monks who looks after the new monk came into the room and started going around to the tables, answering all their questions, giving them all the answers. And so they started. So I'm sitting here, and the guy in front of me is sitting there, and the two of us are the real. We were the long-term monks who were really interested in passing this exam and having it kind of mean something. So we're sitting there, and then there'd go up one side of the room. There'd be someone saying, "What is this? What is that? What is jhana? What are the lokuttara dhammas? What is?" And so I'm sitting there, and just for fun, I shout. I say out fairly loudly. I say, "What does ducharit mean?" And the monk in front of me turns around and he's going to answer to me. And I say, "Oh no, I was just kidding." And as soon as I said that, the room quieted down. 4 days, I think, or 3 days, we had to take 4 different exams. It's not easy. It's not that difficult. It wasn't easy for me because the final exam was you have to write an essay, just like 3 pages, I think, or 4 pages in Thai. And they start you off by giving you a quotation. And ours was a person who has mindfulness is every day awesome, or something like that. Sati, can't remember the exact quote. Anyway, they give you the Pali and the Thai, and then you have to start off. You start off by saying, it's a very standard. You have to memorize the introduction, saying that you're going to now explain this in detail for the purpose of cultivating wisdom and for the purpose of helping people practice. And then you start explaining the verse. So sati is this, da 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 da, and why is it make someone special, da 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 da. And then somewhere in the middle, you have to bring up another verse, and then you talk about that verse. The verse has to be somehow related. So, meanwhile, you've memorized a bunch of verses. You've got this book of verses, and you memorize these verses, like one or two from each section. So you've got a various number of verses that you can pull up, that you can fit. And so you fit it in with the first verse. I don't remember which one I used. And then you talk about that, and then finally you summarize at the very end. It's quite interesting. It's very formal. And when it came out, I guess I was feeling kind of naughty. So the head monk who was sitting out front, he said, "Oh, Noah, you're here. How did you do?" And I said, "Oh, I did really well. I wrote it all in English." And his eyes bulged, and he said, "You can't do that. Who's going to mark it?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just kidding. Probably shouldn't have done that, but yeah, those were the days." An exam proctor, no? More questions?
Yes. I see people going to Buddhist temples to pray for personal gains, whether it be a new job, to get rich, or for their family's health, etc. Isn't praying for these things at a Buddhist temple against Buddhist teachings? Shouldn't it be the role of the monk to teach that these beliefs are not in line with Buddhism? In other words, Buddha is not a god who grants wishes?
Yeah, but you see, when they pray, they also give donations. I'm sorry, that's probably not nice to say, but it's true. Big problem in Buddhism is money has come in. Monks started using money. And let me explain how it's not as obvious as you might think. There's nothing wrong with using money. I mean, money is just paper. So what's wrong with that? But money being as powerful as it is, it gives the monks freedom to do a lot of things. It also, looked at in a different way, it gives responsibility. So if the monks are given money, the implication is that it's now the responsibility of the monk to go and get what they need. I mean, it's not looked at that way. You look at it as it's freedom. You're giving this monk power and freedom to get whatever they want. I don't know what the monk wants. How should I know? I don't come to the monastery. I come here to pray, and then I go. Give him money. He can do what he wants with it. He's satisfied? Good. Now we can do our thing. This kind of attitude, besides being horrible, terribly non-committal and distant from the monastic environment, which in turn gives the monks the freedom to behave however they want because they're no longer at all connected with the lay people, or they're very very little connection. So anyway, it's thought to be given them the freedom, gives them the responsibility. So now from the point of view of the monk, which they don't realize this either, they now have to go and buy this and buy that, which means not only using money, but going out to stores and buying things, or doing whatever you have to do. Whereas the idea was monks would get bare necessities and lay people would offer them food to keep them alive, and that would be that. And the monks not using money had to be content with whatever they had, but had the freedom of not having to go to the stores and worry about buying things and so on. So once the monks begin to do this, they lose support because the lay people are distant and no longer interested. And so the monks begin to get a little bit desperate, and they have to do things like fundraise, because also due to the fact that money leads to power, which leads to corruption and leads you to want things. Once you have money, you start to think, what can I get with that? And it's not always functional. If you're not enlightened, it encourages desires. Oh, maybe I can get this, and whatever you want you can get because you've got money. But then the money runs out. You start to live outside of your means, and so you want more. And so, like anyone who wants money, you find ways of getting it. And the easiest way to get money seems it's short-sighted, but a quick way to get money is just to say whatever, to say something that gets people to do some ritual. Oh yes, when someone dies, I'll do chanting for you. It's easy. I do chanting and then you pay me. It's basically how it happens. I go to funerals here even, and they try to give me money. The last funeral I went to, right, last weekend, we get in the car and the guy tries to hand me a $50 bill just as we're leaving. Oh no, no. But the funny thing is, the monks have actually shot themselves in the foot, because if they didn't touch money, the lay people would be interested in the monastery, and be like, oh, he doesn't have money, we have to keep him alive. So then they'd be like, oh, he needs this and he needs that. And he'd be like, why don't you have sandals? Well, because they broke. Well, why don't you buy? I don't use money. Oh, well, let's get him some sandals. And the thinking arises, and so people get interested. We were talking earlier about getting a grant, right? Or the organization Robin mentioned, and it's not criticizing Robin, but it's a fine idea to look into getting grants for the meditation center. But I said, I mean, I'm not the one doing all this. I'm not the one with the money doing the money thing for the organization. But I said it's probably preferable. I mean, and when I originally said it, it sounded like I just wanted to cut off a source of funding. But I said it's not even that. When you start to look for grants and do things like that, when you're looking for money, um, people start to understand. Oh, yes, they have a money plan, and they have plans to get money, which is going to, you know, pay for all their expenses and so on. And this distances people, takes others out of the equation. Um, when you allow for need to arise, and you take the stance instead that if the needs are not met, we will shut down, then it actually encourages, and it creates a whole different atmosphere where it becomes everyone's project. And not only that, I mean, it's not that it makes it easier. It does generally make it easier to support a monastery in my mind, but easier because you don't have to worry all the time about money. How are we going to find it? But also, it's fair and it's honest, because it says we don't have enough support. It potentially says we don't have enough support to continue this, and so we're going to shut down. We're only running because people want us to run, and when that stops, we will shut down, and we will. And I think that's more honest, to shut down, to say we don't have enough funding, people are not supporting us enough, our expenses aren't met, we'll stop. Even to the point of starving, I think. I think the point would be, if a monk didn't get food, he would do what these Indian ascetics do. I mean, people were doing it in the time of the Buddha, starving. They would starve themselves on purpose. Now, it wouldn't be on purpose, but it's a legitimate practice to let yourself die because you're not getting any food, I think. Yeah, it's hardcore. Most people eyes bulge when they hear such a thing, but anyway. What was the question again?
The question was, when lay people go to the temple and they pray for all these things, so they pray for good health and good finances and all that.
So I'm giving an explanation as to, from my point of view, why it happens. And people get stuck in this trap, and they get stuck in the belief that they need to raise money. So I would criticize the monks in that way, that they're complacent because they feel like they need to do these things in order to, because people would absolutely, at this point, if they stop doing those things, they lose supporters. People would stop coming to the monastery. There's no question. Their monastery might even have to shut down. Many monasteries, temples, whatever you want to call them, would have to shut down if they stopped doing these things. They just wouldn't be able to support. But they've gotten themselves, painted themselves into the corner. They've started in the wrong direction. People were telling me that there's no way I could go without money. It would just be impossible. You can't do that in modern times. Why? Because, well, you can't do the things that you need to do. Even good monks were saying this. My teacher said it to me, actually. Power to him. I mean, later, I mean, but it's, sometimes he says things, it seems to me, says things because that's what he's supposed to say, because he's a big monk. Because he's trying to create harmony. I was totally disharmonious. Is that a word? Discordant, because I was the only monk in the monastery. There was another monk, but he he was forced out eventually as well. He was a good monk, but he was forced out because he had views and so on. But I was a monk who, I was ordained at this monastery. And when I stopped using money, I had the whole monastery, there was a wall of hatred. I could feel this wall of hatred because I stopped using money. And there's a point there. You shouldn't have practice that is fundamentally different from the monks in your monastery. I shouldn't have been there. But what could I do? I was actually quite happy, even with all this hate directed towards me, because I was with my teacher. I could be with him. But he saw it, and he was trying to convince me to fit in with the other monks. But later on, he did end up saying something. When I went somewhere else, when I went to live in the forest, he said, "Do it. Stop. Don't use money." Totally, he said, "This is the problem. Monks get caught up in money, and then they don't practice. They're just always thinking about money. So I want you to do this. Don't use money." He said to me directly. So I mean, we had an understanding. But the point being, there was a point. I've just forgotten it. That monks paint themselves into the corner.
Well, from the point of view of the lay people, I mean, should lay people even think that that's a thing to go and pray for, good finances and good
Right.
health and things? I mean, is that a legitimate thing that a lay person should do?
Yeah, no, I'm not quite there yet. I will
Oh,
get there.
okay, sorry.
But the point is the difference between practice. Right. So I was talking about myself. Because it's a source of confidence for me. I will never touch money as a monk. It's just, there's no way you can convince me of it, because I've seen that they're wrong. People who say this are wrong. You cultivate so much support. I mean, I had people, someone said to me, I was just, they said, one of the lay people said, "You're really good at getting support, getting people, cultivating confidence in people, saddha in people." And it was because this was later when I was living in Los Angeles. They said, "You can't go on alms round." And I went on alms round, and people were saying, it's ridiculous. And in the end, they were almost in tears, because I had to leave and go back to Thailand, because it changed the way people looked at things, the way people saw it, the way to be a monk. I was able and am able to travel around the world without any money. So all I just wanted to say is that if they stopped, because to me the question isn't about money, but that's what it boils down to. It's a question of money. It's, from your point of view, it's a question of wrong practice. So are these proper practices of Buddhism? But they've come from somewhere. People understand, the monks of all traditions, they've been taught the right things. They've been taught Buddhism. But how it's gotten so far removed to the point where we call these things temples, and we call the monasteries temples, and we call monks priests. They're actually calling them priests now. It's just a mistranslation, but it fits. What is a temple? A place where you go to, lift incense and go like this or whatever. And what is a priest? Someone who leads you in prayer, leads you in ceremonies. That's all that we've become. I mean, many of us have become priests living in temples. But there's a reason for it. And so I'm trying to give a little bit of a more detailed background. It's a misunderstanding, and they're wrong, because the amount of support and encouragement and dedication from people who are keen to help and just want to get involved, hands-on interest and support is just overwhelming, totally off the charts. And I see other monks scrounging and trying to find new ways to make money and so on, because they're stuck. They're stuck in the wrong point of view, the wrong way of looking at things. This trying to get, doesn't lead you to happiness. Money doesn't lead you to lead you to happiness. It doesn't lead you to heaven, right? What leads you to heaven? Think about that. So now to the actual question. These are not practices of Buddhism. These kind of rituals, to some extent, they can be tolerated, and then they can be interpreted as Buddhist. Recollection of the Buddha is always good. Some kind of physical act that is a means of expressing reverence when you offer candles, incense, and flowers. But praying to the Buddha, wishing for things, it's almost okay because it's kind of like we do a good deed, and then we make a determination. May this good deed be a support for X to occur. And that's kind of cool because it shows that there's a basic understanding of karma. When you do good deeds, you get a good result. It's an understanding of cause and effect. You can't just pray to the Buddha. You have to do something good and then make a wish through the power of this goodness. May I attain riches? May I have a child? This is people ask. So to that extent, it's okay. Um, and when people pray at Buddhist temples, the idea was that they weren't going to pray to the Buddha, they were going to do it as a determination, adhitthana. That's what they do in Thailand. They call it adhitthana. So you adhitthana, you make an adhitthana, wish for something to happen based on the power of the merit. That's how it's always been phrased, and that's cool, that's fine. Now there's a question as to whether wishing for riches or babies or that kind of thing is actually useful, it's actually Buddhist. Probably not really. Um, but yeah, those that's how it should be. If it has devolved, and Buddhists are now praying to the Buddha, may Buddha grant me this, may Buddha grant me that, praying to Kuan Yin, praying to Bodhisattvas and Buddhas, and all these crazy things that are very, very much not Buddhist. Not my Buddhism, anyway. Okay, one point. Another point, shouldn't it be the duty of the monks to teach that these things are not Buddhist? So that leads back to my explanation. Yes, but money, no? If you teach people not to pray, then they won't come to the monastery. All these, because many people aren't interested in meditation. Many people who call themselves Buddhists aren't interested in enlightenment. They're interested in bettering themselves, usually materially, maybe going to heaven. And it was like that in the Buddhist time as well. So the Buddha allowed for people to make this resolve, people, and for the monks even to wish, may you go to heaven through the power of this good act, may you go to heaven. Even those kind of wishes are okay, and praising or explaining the path to heaven, because that's what people want. They want to go to heaven. Let's tell them how to get to heaven. It's one reason for allowing it does seem to be because it allows us to survive. These people want to feed us, so they want to go to heaven. Let's tell them how to get to heaven. Now goes without saying that if those people were interested in practicing, if they were interested in meditation, then they should be taught meditation. But I think one thing that has to be said here is that we non-Buddhists or neophyte Buddhists, neo-Buddhists, I guess you'd say, people who come to the game late, whether we were just because we were not interested when we were younger, but those of us who didn't grow up steeped in the tradition, we tend to think that somehow magically you can make someone Buddhist, and so we criticize monks who are accepting of these sorts of practices and who allow them to continue and somehow seem to encourage them. But that's really due to our own ignorance and our own naivety. Because if we try, and many young monks do try to, reform the Sangha, and they get nowhere. They wind up with people angry at them, avoiding them. Lay people stop coming to the monastery. So, to some extent, that behavior that I described before, you have to encourage. You have a duty to. It's proper to. It's the correct response. It's what the Buddha did. If someone wants to go to heaven, you teach them the way to go to heaven. If someone wants to get rich, to some extent, you teach them how to get rich. Why do you do that? Because you're teaching them the truth. Why is it proper? It's proper because it's helping them understand true cause and effect. No, cheating people doesn't make you rich. No, indulgence in pleasure doesn't lead you to heaven. Doing good deeds, helping others, overall, meditation leads you to heaven. So you see, it's not wrong. These sorts of things, to some extent, things like charity anyway, teaching the right way is is proper. And so there is that in what you're seeing. People are being encouraged to come to pay respect to the Buddha, to give donations, to give offerings. That's all good. Giving is good. Giving is a religious practice that the Buddha praised. But it becomes so much more, and what you're seeing, I would say, is a corruption based on the fact that the monks get caught up in this practice and start to see it as a means of income. And it becomes, monks get very famous, and there's so much. They find ways of making it seem like there's some holy man, and then they have all these things that they sell amulets or so on, and they talk about different amulets. I mean, it's ridiculous what goes on in Thailand. We watch this. It's just, you could write a doctoral thesis on this thing called the Jatukam. The Jatukam is a corruption of Jatukama, I think. This or Jatugama maybe. This Hindu angel who was imported from Hinduism and was said to protect a specific chaitya or pagoda in southern Thailand. And so these people running that pagoda made these amulets, and they said, "This, if you have this amulet, this angel will protect you." Right? Ridiculous, but good way to make money. And then somebody famous picked one of these amulets up, and somehow convinced people that this was real. This angel really does protect people. Maybe they had an experience, a car accident where they didn't get hurt, etc., etc. And suddenly, like almost overnight, it spread like wildfire through the whole country. And within 6 months, the whole country was wearing jatukam. And monks were pulling in money hand over fist. Monasteries in Thailand became so rich off these things. Any monastery throughout the country that called that what do you call it? Manufactured these amulets became rich overnight. It was ridiculous, obscene. It was obscene, just disgusting. This kind of thing. There was one monk in central Thailand, very famous for being outspoken and sort of this kind of populist monk. So he taught a lot about environmentalism, recycling, living simply. He was a student of Buddha Dasa who was, leaning in that direction. But he did something really funny. He did something called Jatu Kam meaning bite. So he made these cookies and in the shape of an amulet. And he called them Jatu Kam meaning bite. He said you can eat it in 4 bites. But funny that come not only bite, but it's interesting how the word evolved, but it literally means words, 4 words. So imprinted on the cookies were 4 words. U a ka sa. U a ka sa. These 4 words. And these are 4 teachings of the Buddha. So people were using these amulets to become rich. They say, you have this amulet, you get rich, and good things come to you. Every good thing comes through you. And they ended up making huge statues to this angel. Even in Thailand now, it's ridiculous. It's evolved now. Now they're into Ganesha and Ganesha mostly. Everyone has this elephant goddess. The absurdity. Anyway. So yeah, people were thinking this, but he said, "You want to get rich? You guys want to get rich? Try my jatukam. These 4 words, four bites will make you rich, because they really will. This is the Buddha's teaching. U means utthana sampada. If you want to be rich, you have to work hard. Utthana means working hard. You work hard, you'll get rich. You'll succeed. Araka sampada. Is araka sampada. You have to be possessed of the ability to save, to economize. Don't guard your possessions. For example, guard your possessions, but protect them. Look after them. Take care of things. Don't just let things go to disrepair. So the opposite of working to gain money, protecting the things that you have, taking care of the things you have, taking care of your car, your house, your body. I mean, all these things. Ka means kalyanamittata, have good friends. If you have good friends, you'll succeed. If you're surrounded by good people, they will support you. This is how nepotism works. Nepotism comes from a good idea of helping each other, working together, like the mafia, how successful they are. I mean, there's a reason why they're successful. It's turned corrupt, but having a family, having friends, is very useful. Friends in high places, as they say. But good friends, friends who will really care for you and so on. And sat means samajivata, not living outside of your means. Don't get credit cards. Don't get in debt. Don't live outside of your means. Understand what your means are and learn to say no to yourself. These four things. And he made them, and he said, you don't have to wear it, because people were wearing these huge amulets around their necks. He says, you don't have to wear it around your neck. It won't make your neck sore. He was saying. There was a joke about these amulets. It's like, yeah, what is the result of having those amulets around your neck? You get a sore neck. And he said, just eat it. You get full, and you don't have to hurt your neck. So some thoughts. Should lay people, Robin's question is maybe more interesting. What should lay people do? Should they do these things? Should they engage in these practices? To some extent. I mean, they're fun. They're not hurting anyone. Praying to the Buddha, no, you should not pray to the Buddha. That's silly. But you should revere the Buddha and offer your respect to the Buddha image is great. It's fine. But then you should do good deeds and make a determination. Don't pray to the Buddha, just make a prayer. May I be happy, may I be free from suffering, may I attain enlightenment, may I have long life, health, happiness, and strength. Those are all fine. But have it based on your good deeds, because this kind of determination sets you in the direction of working towards those goals. It's all fine. Determination is fine. Again, this is, well, isn't that based on desire? No, not necessarily. It's based on a logic and reason that those things are useful, helpful, beneficial, and you're not lusting after them. You're just making a determination. This is what my goal is. May I attain this. When you think that, it's called adhitthana. It's a parami. It's a perfection. It leads you in that direction. It inclines you in that direction. Okay, I'm going to stop it there because it's too late. And I apologize. I know I didn't get through all the questions, but I think there's one left. Okay, we'll answer the last one. There's only one left, right, Robin?
I think so.
So I'll answer that one, but no more. Any more, you have to wait next day.
Did the Buddha ever talk about Chaikung, Tantra, or various esoteric arts that are used in meditation to reach altered states or higher states of consciousness? And what is a modern-day Buddhist's view on these practices?
I think this will have to wait. My brain hurts. No, it doesn't hurt. I'm just tired. I can't think anymore. See, it shuts down.
That was a really good answer. I mean, that should have been its own video.
What one?
Your last answer there for the long answer, that should have been its own video.
We could turn it into one. So you can ask that question again tomorrow. My brain will be working again. But the brain is an organ. I don't eat in the afternoon, so by this time at night, it's a little bit, there are limits. Anyway, I'm going to say goodnight. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you, Robin, for being my co-partner. Oh, I had some idea about, so Ali is still set to come on Friday. It looks like he's gone. No? Oh, there he is. Ali's still here. So Friday we have our first guest. We're not calling it the Monkley Show. That's too obscene, too crass. We'll come up with a better name. Someone come up with a better name for us. Or else it's just going to be Sirimangalo International Presents or something like that. Which is probably the best. We'll just call it Sirimangalo International Presents. SI Presents. No, it's not quite good enough. Someone come up with a good name. Post it tomorrow. Okay, good night.
Thank you, Bhante.
Be well.